before we get to my actual entry, I'm going to give 2 quick shout outs because I don't think anyone is going to say them yet. Could be wrong and then look silly, but never mind. And that is to The Dark Knight and to Spider-Man 2. Because those are 2 comic book movies and they're both, in my opinion, much better than the originals, Batman Begins and Spider-Man. Just my opinion though, hey. But my entry, what I'd like to talk about today is Toy Story 2, because I was going to say Toy Story 3, but I realized I've got a little bit more to say about Toy Story 2. So we're going with Toy Story 2. So Toy Story 1 came out in, I should have researched this, 1995 or 6, I'm gonna say, because I know Toy Story 2 was 99. That might also be wrong. It was a little while after, it wasn't too much after. And then 3 came out in 2010. We were all obviously grown up by then, most of us, points at Ewan and Josh. And, oh God. But Toy Story 1 and Toy Story 2 for me, I was very, very young when these came out. And I just remember thinking like, 1 was so groundbreaking because of what it did with 3D animation. It was the first feature-length 3D animated film and it was incredible. Oh my God, the walls were just smashed, the boundaries were broken. It was incredible technologically. But the story and the sort of lessons behind it were all quite simple. It was toys who belonged to a boy who got lost and then tried to find their way back home to the boy. There was a little bratty neighbor kid next door. But that's basically the gist of it. But then with Toy Story 2, you have established characters, and then in a sequel you have this opportunity to do something new with them. With Toy Story 2, they had this opportunity to introduce more toys, and then the whole aspect of like toys being collectibles, and because the whole thing, their purpose in life is to be played with and enjoyed by people. And then they introduced this theme that would it be a better life just to be on a shelf and pristine forever, and I really, really liked that exploration. I thought it was really, really good. So you had obviously the jokes and the funny characters and the great toys and that, but you also had this amazing story that made you really think as well, like, oh, is Woody really gonna leave Andy? Of course, with that comes up again in 3 and then again in 4, doesn't it? But it's just, oh man, Toy Story, I feel like they keep getting better, but then do they though? I don't know. That's a loaded sentence that, I don't know. In my opinion, I think 3 is the best, but I just think the jump between 1 and 2 was so significant. So we'll go with that. Finger gun.
See, I know there is an entire theme of movie sequels, you know, being worse than the first films. And I think, you know, to a degree, I definitely agree with that. But there have been so many great sequels now that I thought I'd set myself a little challenge and think about a movie sequel that no one ever tends to talk about, and that is Scream 2. Now, I love the first Scream. I think Wes Craven was one of the most genius horror icons that we've ever had in cinema, and you know, Scream is a testament to that. I think it's a genius film. The way it kind of lampoons all the cliches of the horror genre, has some amazing performances in there. I love seeing Matthew Lillard. Who doesn't love seeing Matthew Lillard as a crazy serial killer? It's great. Kind of spoiled the ending for it there, but we'll carry on. Anyway, and then Scream 2 came around, and it kind of was already at a disadvantage because it didn't have the benefit of being the first one. And you know, when you see with a lot of films that tend to satirize things, is that they have less things to satirize the further they get in, kind of evidenced by stuff like National Lampoon or, you know, Airplane or any of those sorts of films. And Scream 2 actually, I think, benefits in a weird way of being less hyped than the first film, and so it's therefore less familiar. Now, I'd seen the first Scream dozens and dozens of times by the time that I'd seen the sequel, which I actually caught for the first time the other year. And I watched it and I thought it was just so fresh, and I thought it was almost a little bit more scathing and self-referential than the first film. And I think it kind of really benefits from that. And it's strange because I'm watching that and I'm like, oh yeah, sitting the nick out of, you know, sequels not being better than the original and stuff. And to me, it kind of is the perfect movie sequel because it innovates on all the tropes of the first film, and in a way it kind of realizes how it's beholden to its own cliches. And I know that kind of being meta and self-referential to your own flaws is a little bit of a cop-out, but Scream 2 does it in such a way that I really, really enjoyed and engaged with in a really, really weird way. And yeah, I don't know, it's weird. They also had in a genuine way, I kind of felt more attached to the characters from the first film. Obviously, they keep on developing, Neve Campbell's character. You've obviously got Courtney Cox's Gale Weathers, which is the best name for a reporter ever. And yeah, I don't know, Scream 2, there's something about it that I find much more appealing to watch than the first film. And even though I think the first film was great, I do think Scream 2 benefits from the idea of it, being less hyped in a way. And you can approach that and kind of engage the twists and turns in its own way. Also, a young Liev Schreiber's in it, and also Timothy Olyphant's in it, which I thought was hilarious because they're all playing late 90s student dude bros, which I thought was very enjoyable. Also Randy. Who doesn't love Randy? He's great, isn't he? Yeah, Randy. Shout out to Randy.
Right, well, my favourite sequel ever is VHS 2, which I think is much better than VHS 1, which is, genuinely the best anthology film there is out there for horror movies. But that isn't the entry I'm going to talk about, because we always do a little run-up with these things, don't we? A few little steps first. Evil Dead 2, better than Evil Dead. Horror does it best when it comes to better sequels. Bride of Frankenstein as well, all this good stuff. But my entry for this is Thor Ragnarok, because the first Thor, I feel like, it's a great movie. It's one of my favourite MCU films. I really love Thor as a character, and I think establishing him in that movie was great. And the way that he's like this Shakespearean, very like straight-laced sort of character, who's a bit of a dude bro frat boy that has to come to terms with like getting Mjolnir back and becoming worthy and all that sort of thing. And then The Dark World, we don't talk about. And then it got to Thor Ragnarok, where he kind of had gone through the same things quite a lot and just remained this character. And he was reborn with Taika Waititi's wonderful sense of humour and magic cast on him, where he now understands sarcasm and has all these new humorous qualities to him, which make him a much better, more rounded character. And the film itself is just a better film. Like, it's better put together, it's better envisioned, it's in the post Guardians of the Galaxy era, so it has all of the excellent like nostalgic vibes and bright colours, and it's when Marvel had really come into their own. So I feel like this is just a perfect example of like someone stepping up and getting better, and his arc in that I think is fantastic in comparison to the first one, and that could only have happened if it had been built up so much throughout the series. So from all of this building blocks that has been laid out, to have like this whole like losing his eye and having Ragnarok and Hela coming around and slashing him and all that sort of thing. I just think it's just a great movie. It's just a really, really enjoyable movie, more so than the first one, but has that emotional weight behind it of his character developing in a really coherent and interesting way, which I think, I don't know, I just think it's a very unique movie, and it's much better than the first one. And the MCU is one of those cases where they can only get better and better, and they have continued to get better and better, and Thor is the best example of that.
Well, like a lot of people said in the last episode, actually, of Chatty Faces, it took me a long time to get into the original Blade Runner. The first time I watched it, I wasn't too keen. The second time I watched it, I really loved it. So I didn't really have the build-up that a lot of people must have had for Blade Runner 2049. I knew I loved the cast, I knew that Roger Deakins was the cinematographer, and I knew that my boy, Denis Villeneuve, I think I've got that pronunciation wrong, I hope so, please let me know in the comments, was directing. And he is one of my favourite modern directors working today. I've loved every single one of his films, so I had a lot of expectations for this movie, but not really as a sequel. I just thought I would like it kind of disconnected from the first, and yet it came around, and it was one of those rare movies that made me like the original even more. The way it fleshed out the world, the way it fleshed out Deckard as a character was so interesting and kind of subversive and, you know, kind of impactful in a way that I just didn't expect. When I was watching Blade Runner the original, I was watching Harrison Ford, you know, play this kind of cop who doesn't, you know, he doesn't know really if he's, you know, human or a replicant. I know that Ridley Scott is very adamant that he was. But I didn't really have an emotional investment in his story. I just thought it was quite cool to watch him hunt down all these androids. Whereas when it came to the sequel, I was so invested in his sort of human relationship with his daughter who was missing. And I thought that was such a... I couldn't fault it because it made me love a character that I otherwise only liked. And that's without even mentioning, you know, Ryan Gosling's role as this kind of person who thinks he's the chosen one. In all the way through, he's being told that, you know, he's got this destiny, and then there's a moment kind of halfway through that, spoilers, he finds out that he's not, and that all of his memories have kind of been implanted. And again, that was another cool, subversive storytelling beat that I just didn't see coming. Every single thing that I thought this movie would be it wasn't, and that was so refreshing to go in a massive Hollywood blockbuster that cost millions and millions of dollars to make and be constantly surprised all the way through at these daring choices. And it was obviously, needless to say, very well acted, very, very well shot. The visuals in the original Blade Runner still hold up, but this, for me, has so much more texture and variety when compared to the original. And that's not saying that the original's bad, it's still great, but like I said at the beginning, there is no other sequel that I can think of that made me enjoy the original even more. And I don't know if I would consider the original Blade Runner one of my favorite movies if the sequel didn't come out.
Well, sadly, I can't go and talk about the Resident Evil films because the first one is the pinnacle of the series. And then I was kind of thinking, well, I really like Aliens more than Alien, but I think that's more of a personal thing. And I think they both stand together as like two fantastic movies. So for me, I'm going to be really basic and just go for The Empire Strikes Back.
A classic of the genre.
Yes. Well, Star Wars, the original one, is literally a moment in time for cinema where it just kind of changed everything from like taking traditional story methods and just mixing it up a bit. And like, you know, the visual effects and everything like that is a massive leap. Then we get Empire, and then we actually get these characters that we've been introduced to. We don't have to focus on any of that. It's just straight into it. Put them on a chilly planet, get some big, giant, walking dog-looking things, and let's go. And then after that, literally after this fantastic opening, I think it's half an hour and a half. Like, for instance, like I'm just gonna go into things like C-3PO. C-3PO in this film is a better character than like half of the characters ever in Star Wars. He's just so animated and so out there, and the bickerness between him and Han, and then between the Millennium Falcon, which we find out later was it L3? But he's a standout character, and he's just a side robot. We have the whole romance angle between Han and Leia fully informed here as they're being chased through an asteroid field by a fleet of Star Destroyers, with the fantastic score backing it by John Williams again. Like the whole asteroid field sequence again is like better than all the space parts in the original. And then we finally get like the big, probably the first big spoiler ever in cinema that people want spoilers, the whole I am your father bit. Fantastic. And the whole, even the lightsaber fight in this film is a step up from the original. We get brand new characters that are great, like Lando, and I can't really find a part of this film that I would sit there and go, ugh. Like if I watch The Phantom Menace, I do sit there and there's the boring bit when you sit there on the Tatooine and young Annie is like, this is pod racing. And then you go to Coruscant for a bit and you got Plo Koon and Caddy Moody chilling. But in Empire Strikes Back, I could watch that all the way through all the time. And it's near a perfect film. Like nothing's ever perfect, but I would give it a 5, 10 out of 10, like, and then say, this is what most sci-fi epics should look towards.
I think there's a reason why every good sequel or middle part of a trilogy gets compared to Empire, because that's like the bar, that's the example of how to just smash it.
Smashed it, ruined it. What are you gonna do now? They won, they did it. This film made sure that Star Wars, for maybe forever, is now a cultural icon going forward. And it doesn't matter if you get these Jar Jar Binkses or anything like that from The Last Jedi, Star Wars, because of this film, boosted up by the original. That's it, they won. Best sequel ever made.